Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this themeless week, just kind of listening to a bunch of songs that don't have anything to do with one another or tie together in any overarching ways. Today we're going to be looking at an artist who I don't think we've ever checked out on the channel before, but I have seen their name somewhere. I doubt I've listened to their music, or at least I can't put us down to the name, but like I said, the name does look familiar to me for some reason. We are looking at Jakub Zytecki. We're going to be looking at the track Remind Me off of their Remind Me album. Let's dive in and see what Jakub is bringing to the table today. Big immediate drum build up into lower energy. Interesting rhythmic devices here. Some fun percussive finger tap guitar parts. Yeah, the polyrhythm is wild though. Polymeter, maybe? Very poppy, almost leaning into R&B. Tons of vocal production, but also a general focus on production and texture. Synthesizer work here, pretty big departure from that finger playing guitar work from previous segment. Solid 4 on the floor. Again, leaning into that R&B and then pulling out before it really gets there. Okay. That 2 and 4 snare hit it's crisp. You just gotta violently lurch into that. It almost has a Djenty thing going on with the guitar work underneath. Something that Tesseract would do, or maybe some of the poppier Periphery songs. So 80s electronic drums into the guitar lick. Very percussive and light melody playing. There's that 2 and 4 snare. It's a very dancey song though. I like that descending arpeggio. Very chirpy, very bright. Ooh. Dude, that harmonic twist there. And now outside the club, everything's low and muffled. What is this track? building. Dude, that like low down to guitar works so well with this poppy 2 and 4 snare and like atmospheric synth stuff. This goes a lot harder than it should. Like on paper, this should not be as, you know, the vibes. Okay. Yeah. I felt that. I felt it just ending because so much of this track has been, you know, jarring transitions. I would have looked a fool if I had stopped and the music didn't. It's happened in the past. Okay. You know, something I don't get to say too often with reactions is I had a lot of fun with that. It's either, well, actually, I guess usually there's an appreciation or an admiration for the musicianship, the composition, um, and, you know, an appreciation of the art that goes into it. And usually when we dive into analysis, it's the more technical side of things, you know, enjoying that artistic side to the music. Or I get to say, you know, I enjoyed that. It was fun, not a lot to dig into, but, you know, I liked what I listened to. Um, but I think this is interesting because it's both worlds. This is incredibly complex. I don't know how long this analysis segment's going to be. I have a lot I want to talk about, but I just also had a blast listening to it. Like, this is one of those tracks that it just walks that line so finely where it's the best of both worlds. And, you know, I guess the first thing I want to bring up is what, who, what's the purpose of the project? Because this song goes all over the place. It's tough for me to really figure out what the core of this artist or this band. I don't know. Maybe it's just one person. I'll have to look into that later. There's a lot of things going on, but also a lot of it is digital too. I'd probably say that there's a drummer, a guitarist, and then a lot of production, synthesizer, stuff like that. But it's quite possible that Jakub does both drums and guitar on this. So, but I don't feel a core to it. You know, when you listen to metal, even if you listen to progressive metal, there is still the heartbeat of the band's style, whether it is intense riffage or maybe a leaning towards classical composition or chords, or maybe they're a band that jumps around between styles, something a bit more experimental. Um, there's that like that core idea that no matter what they're doing with their music, it's them because of this, right? And I don't know enough. The 6 minute segment's not enough for me to dive into who Jakub is as an artist. My best guess right here is just an explorer, a journeyman of genres. There's so many ideas in here, and there's Some really cool finger work on the guitar at the beginning, and then we have a sick, like Gen Z style guitar solo that dips into percussive finger work as well as cool runs and dipping the toes lightly into jazzy ideas. That kind of makes me want to put them in the same realm as, maybe Polyphia or Pliny, or why am I blanking out on a third one? He's really great. I think he's a Japanese guitarist. I cannot think of his name. But like it kind of makes me want to put whoever's playing guitar into that realm, but the song doesn't focus on that at all. It's something that it leans into at times and then pulls out of and explores other things. I think if I had to label anything as the core of this track, it's going to be a sort of poppy R&B concept. There's a lot of synth work, a lot of atmosphere and texture, and anytime the vocals are present, they are drenched in production techniques in order to widen them out and give them space and character and color, because a lot of it is sort of this ethereal, light kind of ideas, and they're just not going to be very present against a lot of the physicality to the music. And so the production helps the vocals match the energy that the rest of the instruments are coming in at. But that I think is maybe, and honestly, despite it being a majority of this track, that I could see it as like the core of what this song is exploring, it's still only like 30 or 40% of the song. It just happens that nothing else really is explored as in depth as the vocals and that pop aesthetic are. But I don't think I could call this a pop track. It's too exploratory, it's too progressive, it's too rock. I mean, there's very few genres that are going to pull out that kind of guitar work that aren't rock genres. So it's a smorgasbord of a lot of ideas that maybe this is the identity of Jakub. But again, like I had mentioned earlier, I really would need more time with this artist's work to kind of pinpoint what I think would be, the heart of their style. But it could just be like a Sleep Token situation where there's just, the exploration of so many different ideas and smashing them together is this artist's, their identity, their musical identity. But I think that was one of the big things that stood out to me in this track, was just how varied it is, for better and for worse. I mentioned right at the beginning of the track, we have this snare, rising energy, rising volume. It's like 2 beats long, and then it just diminishes. We build into nothing. And I feel that about a lot of this track, not necessarily about building into nothing, but about ideas just not connecting to what they're doing next. There's a couple of smooth transitions, I think, pulling from the R&B moment into that guitar solo around minute 3 or 4, something like that. That was smooth simply because the guitar comes in prior to its solo. It has some pickup notes that help pull us across that gap, but honestly, there is still a gap there. The two ideas don't really gel well together. We're just distracted from that schism by the guitar kicking off their melody. But for the most part, the ideas just don't smoothly move into one another. And beyond the compositional fluidity, there's also not really sonic fluidity. And I think this is something that metal can get away with rather well now that I'm thinking about it. One of the things I've talked about with metal tracks, not all of them, but some bands, is the use of harsh transitions. We were doing this riff in this drum pattern, now we're doing this riff in this drum pattern. And while it tends to be a frictional part for me enjoying the genre, not too many people seem to have an issue with it. And I think it's one of those things that maybe it's just from growing up with this sound, but I also think there's another layer to it, which is that the guitar tones, the drum tones, the aggression, the intensity of it all isn't changing. There is that atmospheric fluidity between these two passages, even if musically there's not a lot of fluidity there. And that's something we don't get here. Compositionally, it's jagged, but also the experience of these moments is jagged. And I think that makes it stand out even more to me. It makes some of the ideas that do have some sort of momentous movement between ideas stand out even more. There are some moments where bringing back the 2 and 4 snare hits is enough for me to say, oh, that kind of connected. We're kind of trying to bridge these two somehow by bringing back an idea from the past. And it allows little nuances like that to carry more weight than normally they would be able to shoulder. And maybe it's just the heightened contrast of it all, that this song is so jagged that even the smallest attempt to bridge things feels massive. Maybe it's just a lack of familiarity, though, as is common with music or songs that are kind of all over the place. The more you listen to them, the more familiar you get, and the less jagged they seem. Oh, it's weird though. For some reason, I just thought of was it Kojim Dip? But like, if they were indie pop rock, that's what this track is. The way my brain works sometimes. If that doesn't make any sense to you, that's fine. I think it barely makes sense to me. Um, Focusing on some minutia though, the guitar work is thick. We have some really cool percussive finger stuff at the beginning, which, yeah, I was kind of impressed by that, but it was only a bar, maybe a bar and a half tops. It was more of a tease for what we would get later. About a minute before the solo, we introduce some more guitar stuff. It's once again a percussive melodic idea that's bouncing between the two sides of the song. We get a little bit more familiarity with this sound. It's longer than just a bar. And I like the counterpoint it applies against the vocals here. And then a minute or so later, we get a full on sort of jazzy new guitar technique solo. And one, still percussive. Two, there's some really intense things going on in here as far as performance. I think the first thing that blew me away was it was like 4 30-second notes, palm muted, and it just sounds so crisp. And it was in the middle of this more melodic legato stuff. So we have that texture shift from legato to staccato because of the palm muting, but we also have the rhythmic shift from something that's a bit slower into this faster burst back into the slower. And it's just, dude, it's candy. It is ear candy. It sounds so good. And it's sort of what reminds me of Polyphia. It's that same type of more technical oriented with lots of contrast, contrasting rhythms, contrasting textures, contrasting ranges. We hear all of that here. It's high contrast. Actually, that's probably why some of the older crowd calls it ADHD guitar playing. I still call it the Gen Z way. It just feels like most people playing it are younger than me. um, but yeah, it is high contrast. It is constantly warping and changing across so many parameters. And I think that's why I call it ear candy, because that's the same phrase I use for high fidelity production, typically in electronic music or pop music, where there are things constantly changing and moving and adapting. And it just feels like there's always something new to listen to. And that happens in this guitar solo. Yeah, okay. High contrast guitar melody playing. That's the ear candy method right there. I really hope that doesn't take off. That's a terrible naming convention for that. Although maybe more descriptive than Gen Z playing? I don't know. Anyways, I love it here. And the cool thing is, it's contrast on contrast. The solo itself is full of changing sounds, textures, and melodies, and speeds and rhythms, but it's also a drastic change from what came prior to it and what comes after it. The song is high contrast as well. So the guitar work is phenomenal. And if I had to wager, I'd say Jakub is probably a guitarist, probably pulling this stuff off, and probably at one point created guitar-centric music, and this might be an exploration for them to branch out into more electronic or production-based music that maybe has had their interest for a while. Could also be the other way around, where they started as a producer and picked up the guitar and learned some of this more technical modern guitar playing. Either way, I would say that they probably started in one camp and moved to the other, and this is their attempt to blend these two worlds. The guitar work does stand out to me as probably the most impressive element in here on a pure technical level. Though that isn't to diminish the production side of things either. There's so many cool sounds, textures, atmospheres on this track. It is actually a really good showcase of whoever the producer is and their skill in crafting these atmospheres and sounds. Maybe still a track I would need more time to digest and understand and become familiar with all the twists and turns on it. But as far as almost like a medley of this is what this artist can do, this is a fantastic introduction to the width of skills on display within this artist. And I think that the atmospheric shifts, the production changes, the way everything sounds, some of the more electronic-based micro transitions that happen in here, where it's sort of like in the rock and metal world where we might use a drum fill to create a small change in a rather static idea. Maybe we have a 16-bar phrase, the guitar riff isn't going to change throughout here, but at the 8-bar point, halfway through the entire run, the drum will do something to change things up. And that's kind of what these little micro transitions are on the production side. Sometimes we'll cut out all the sound and have like these little, almost like chittering, tick, 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 little tiny sounds for a second before whoom, we like crescendo the sound back in, or have the sound ramp back in volume wise. Little things like these that are just, it keeps the song feeling fresh from moment to moment. And you know, the song doesn't really need that. It is high contrast anyways, but they're still in there. And it's just really interesting to listen to everything come together in a way that feels incredibly high fidelity. I don't know if I'd put the electronic composition and production on the same level as some of my favorite electronic artists, but it's certainly a lot better than I would expect your top of the line, high mastery guitarist to be able to pull off. It's a completely different set of skills, and on display here are both of them, the guitar and the production, all while blending together this really cool like R&B pop vocal stuff too. Granted, I think if you listen to the raw vocals, they're going to be a bit more lower energy, lighter, ethereal. Not that they're lacking skill. There is still, I'm going to assume, in tune, on pitch, well supported, all the general ideas that go into playing any instrument. But I don't think that there is as much virtuosity, that's the word, on display from the vocals as there are in the production or the guitars, but it certainly still gives the song an identity, a quality. Anytime the vocals are present, they're leaning into this very light, moody, ethereal R&B style vocals. And even a couple of the vocal melodies I felt pushed really hard into R&B tropes, where maybe that doesn't happen all the time, but it's still something that if I were to put a sub-genre on this, it is R&B adjacent. And I think that's pretty cool because we have pop and electronic and indie rock, or whatever you want to call, I don't know what you would call like Polyphia. It's not experimental rock, is it? Modern rock? I don't know, whatever that genre is, but also R&B and jazz. I don't remember if it's jazz, but jazz is in here too, and it's sort of all over the place within this realm of light, palatable pop rock, but not pop rock the genre, just pop and rock, and sort of the areas of what is palatable within those sounds. And I find it really impressive that it does kind of all come together. It is disjointed at times. Some of the ideas don't work well together, but it is a rather comprehensive 6.5 minutes exploring a sound. That sound is a collection of all others, but there is no moment when it really deviates from that. It's not like it randomly turns into black metal or trip hop or anything like that. Like, it knows what it is. It is a collection of a bunch of ideas. This is plunder genre right here. But it is that. It doesn't deviate from its sound. And I think that's pretty cool too. An understanding of what is and what isn't under this massive umbrella, to put lines in the sand and say, we will not cross those. Granted, we're still taking up a lot of space here, but there are limits to what this song is going to explore. It's a wild track, and I think beyond anything else, it is somehow still incredibly dancey, despite the polymetric, possibly drumming at the beginning, and sort of the djenty drop guitars with odd rhythmic phrasings that we had in a couple of places too. Although djent is known for high groove despite its rhythmic jaggedness, so maybe that's just maybe that's what elevates the grooviness of it too. It is a track that is easily listenable to, incredibly simple to dance to. It gets inside your bones and forces you to move, all while still being complex and unique in ways. I've never heard djent R&B before, so that's kind of cool in and of itself. Let's hit some lyrics. There are somehow simultaneously more lyrics than I expected, and it also doesn't seem to, the lyrics don't seem to be as long as I expected either. It doesn't make any sense, but I pulled up the lyrics like, dude, these are more stanzas than I thought. And then I read to the end and I was like, wait, shouldn't there be more? It's a really weird contradiction there. I think it's because it's a 6.5 minute song, but when I think about it, I don't really remember the vocals being much in there at all. But it is a pop track, and I would assume that every minute has lyrics. I don't know, it's like I'm holding opposing ideas of how the lyrics should be, and both are subverted. Anyways, the lyrics seem to be about a relationship between two, maybe people, definitely a person and an idea at least. And our narrator has this other concept stuck in their mind. It says, your word in my head, in this whole life to your ways, conforming. There's a world you want to save, but you can't even fix yourself. So he says, you've been trying to control my life and tell me what to do, and I have allowed you to. I've conformed and molded myself to fit your ideals. But when I look at you, you're not perfect either. Why don't you work on yourself? But there is, I don't know, a positivity to this. Maybe a want to fix things. It says, yet you remind me of a longing distance, and I hate thinking of the time we wasted, for this fight was heaven sent, and I sold the dreams and bought the arguments. What a mess, what a shame. At least we've got something new to defend. And basically says, this hasn't worked. What should have been positive ended up being negative, but I still kind of want it. He says, you remind me of a longing distance. The pain of wanting to be closer to something than you are. It says, this should have worked out. But from the start, we sold the dreams and bought arguments. That, I like that. That's a good line right there. He says, but your word in my head was all that I've meant, and it made me forget about all the other ways, all the different faces and different intentions. I've got to let it go. He says, despite all of this, despite how much I want this to work, how much I remember the way things were, and how I'd want to return to that, I got to get your voice out of my head. It keeps me from discovering everything else, forgetting about other ways and other faces and other intentions. It's time to end this. I didn't get much of that from the music. Maybe the clashing between the sounds in general. I mean, we have R&B, which is light, and ethereal, and kind of moving into that love direction. I think there's a couple moments where I kind of felt that, or maybe the longing, the pain I felt in there. But it's also contrasted with this heavy weight too, the djenty guitars. I think there are moments when I can feel this division, this feeling of being pulled in two directions, of having two opposing wants, and you can't have them simultaneously. You must choose one over the other. I don't know if I'd say every moment of this song felt like that, but I think knowing the lyrics, I can retroactively, ascribe the lyrical themes to moments of the song at least. Very interesting. If anyone is a fan of Jakub, is this typical for their output? If I had checked out this whole album, would I find more of this, or is this more of an outlier? Because I'm kind of jamming to this. I like this, even if I just turn it on, listen to it once, and enjoy the vibes, dance with it for half an hour or whatever. I think I'd still enjoy it. Still would be worth the listen. But these are just my thoughts on Jakub Zytecki's Reminds Me. What did you think of this, though? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on if I misspoke about something? Do you have your own perspective or interpretation of this track? Please put that as well as anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree, which takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.